Hello and welcome to the first lesson of Music Theory Tutor. I am your tutor. Lesson 1 is the major scale on the keyboard. Music is based on the letters A through G. After you get to G, you start over and go back to A. I'm going to start off by showing you C to C on the piano keyboard. Here we see the notes C, D, E, F, G start over at A, B, and C. The red C signifies that we've started over at the note C, and we count 8 notes total if we count the second C. This is what we call an octave, based on the number 8. As you may have observed, I've only named the notes that are on the white keys of the keyboard. The black keys themselves are alterations of the white keys. A sharp is what happens when you raise a white key up to a black key. As you can see, C sharp is raised to C, a D sharp is a raised D, an F sharp is a raised F, G sharp from G, A sharp from A. Conversely, a flat is what happens when you lower a note. So D flat is a lowered D, E flat from E, G flat from G, A flat from A, B flat from B. The next thing we will examine is the half step versus the whole step. It's pretty self-explanatory on the keyboard, but as you can see, C to D skips a black key, and that is what you call a whole step. Between a white key and a black key is a half step, and between two white keys that have no black key in between them is a half step. The notes that I've already shown you, the octave between C and C, is what we call a major scale. Between the first two notes, C and D, we see that we have an interval of a whole step. That is because there is a C sharp or D flat between them. Between D and E is another whole step. Between E and F, we see that there is no black key, no sharp or flat for either of them, so we call that a half step. Between the notes F, G, A, and B are all three whole steps. And between B and C is a half step, just like there is between E and F. So the intervals of a major scale are 1, 1, 1 half, 1, 1, 1, and 1 half. The notes of the major scale are ordered in a particular ascending order, as you can see right here. C being the first note, D being the second, E is the third note, F is the fourth, G is the fifth, A is the sixth, B is the seventh. Then we are back to C, which is the first scale degree. As you can see, the intervals between C, D, E, and F are a whole step, and a half step. Similarly, the intervals between G, A, B, and C are a whole step, and a half step. This leaves the odd man out, which is the interval between F and G. The intervals between C and F and G and C are what we call a tetra, and we will touch on that later on. Now let's apply this principle to the G scale. Here you see I've ordered the notes G through G, which is G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So let's test out the intervals. G to A is a whole step. There is a black key in between. A to B is a whole step. B to C is a half step. C to D is a whole step. D to E is a whole step. E to F is a half step. F to G is a whole step. Now let's compare it to the C major scale. In the C major scale, where do we have the half steps? We have the half steps between 3 and 4, and we have the half steps between 7 and 1. Now let's go back to the G scale. Is there a half step between scale steps 3 and 4 and 7 and 1? Yes, between B and C there is a half step, but between F and G, it looks like there is a black note in between. So how are we going to fix this? Earlier we talked about raising notes, and so that's exactly what we're going to do with this F. We're going to replace the F with an F sharp. Now the interval between E and F sharp is a whole step, and the interval between F sharp and G is a half step. Now we have a major scale between G and G by replacing the F with an F sharp. Let's do another one. From D to D now. D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. Between D and E we have a whole step. Between E and F is a half step. F to G to A to B are all whole steps. B to C is a half step, and C to D is a whole step. Let's test that against the C major scale. If we remember from before, the half steps in the C major scale are between 3 and 4 and 7 and 1. So let's see if the half steps in the D scale are between 3 and 4 and 7 and 1. Well, it looks like between F and G we have a whole step, and that's not what we need between 3 and 4. So let's look over at C and D. Nope, that's also a whole step. We're going to have to fix both of those intervals. The first thing we're going to need to do is raise the F to an F sharp like we did previously. in order to make the interval between scale step 3 and scale step 4 a half step. Scale step 7 and 1 are also a whole step apart when they need to be a half step apart, so we are going to raise the C to a C sharp, making this interval a half step. Now we have the D major scale by raising the F and C to F sharp and C sharp. Let's test this out one more time on the F scale. Here we see all of the intervals between F and F. Now we'll test it against the C major scale, where the scale degrees 3 and 4 and 7 and 1 have the half steps. Let's see how the F scale matches up. Okay, we have a half step between 7 and 1, but what about 3 and 4? 3 and 4 is a whole step. However, this time we can't solve the problem by just raising a note. We're actually going to have to lower the 4th scale degree, because we also need a whole step between scale step 4 and 5. Think back to the beginning of the lesson. How do we lower a note? Correct, we're going to need to make a flat note. So B will become B flat, causing a half step between 3 and 4, and causing a whole step between 4 and 5. That's it for lesson number 1. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for future lessons.